kind of in the same boat as you are. I have to say, though, before I went into the training, I am part of a 12-step fellowship. Before the training, I remember talking to a friend saying, I don't understand how people can get sober without a 12-step program. And I said, I don't know either, but I want to see. And I went in there kind of with some bias about 12-step program, and especially with the MAT clinic, because for me to, Suboxone, you're just changing one drug from another drug, and I wasn't educated enough on it. I knew coming in there was 20 some in our class, and a very small percentage of them actually were using a 12-step program, which to me was like, oh my goodness. And it wasn't like everybody was sitting around saying, I'm addicted to alcohol, or I'm addicted to this drug, and this is the recovery path I use. It was just, everybody's here in recovery, let's talk about what recovery means. Which it really opened my eyes, and it made me show that recovery just doesn't happen in a 12-step meeting. It happens through all these different pathways, and it opened my mind to that. Addiction is not what we were addicted to and how we use how I use my drugs and alcohol, and the things that I like better than not liking. Other people wasn't their cup of tea, but for me, that's what got me. The addiction is the same. The disease is the same thinking, the same patterns, that kind of obsession. However, my recovery is my recovery. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And going through the peer recovery coach training really showed me that recovery, everybody's recovery path is up to that. And it isn't a one-size-fits-all. So I really enjoyed that with it, just broadening my horizons when it came to recovery.
And that makes sense, too, that, the way you just said it like that. That's why if you go to some meetings, they're like, well, this is the way it works. It's because you think, well, okay, the addiction's the same, not like the drug, but the craving, the mental, I'm going to lie, I'm going to do this, that all is the same, I agree. But that's probably why they're like, oh, well, if it worked for one, it's going to work for, I'll just do what I did. Yeah. If I could tell you, hey, for me, it's eating ice cream, and I eat ice cream and I don't drink, okay, well, I'm just switching one addiction for the other.
Yes.
I know that's a fact. But doing healthy things, doing productive things, having goals, being realistic, practicing acceptance.
Yes.
Practice listening skills. Someone tells you, hey, cut my pizza this way. You got to listen to that, and you got to cut the pizza that way. And then you have to accept when it comes out and it's not done right.
Yes.
Just like they have to accept the fact that I'm going to go...
on Yelp?
No, I'm not going to yell. I'm just going to express my disappointment.
Yelp. Are you going to go on Yelp?
I'm not going to drink over it.
Good.
I'm not going to let it ruin the rest of my day.
Just the next 20 minutes of this interview?
Maybe.
Okay.
No. But I do appreciate you coming on. And I know you're probably like, what, that's it? But we'll do more later.
Are we done?
I don't know. Do you want to be done?
No.
What do you want to talk about?
Just get started.
Okay. Hey, Ryan, I think this is time for Rad Dad to take over.
Can we take a break so I can eat?
Yes. All right, we're going to take a break, and we'll come right back.
Stay tuned.
And you're not even going to know we're gone.
Woohoo!
That's going to sound really silly when you listen back to it.
Probably.
We're not really going anywhere. Woo. All right. Now, okay, we're back from eating pizza.
Delicious pizza that was.
Yeah, in the squares.
In squares. It eats the same.
Well, since you ask. Anyway, we're still here with Laura because we didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, we ate pizza. It was exciting.
Yeah. Oh, do you want to talk about what happened while we ate pizza?
What happened when we ate pizza? It was a lot.
A couple more predators came in.
Corey, you got to stop. Seriously.
Stop what?
Women are not predators.
Not all women, no.
No, they're not.
But there are some.
There's a lot of men predators, too.
Okay, I'm not one.
That's good to know. I don't... I plead the fifth.
Whoa. All right, enough with the fun and games. You want to be serious?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell us your story?
My story. Okay, my recovery story.
You have 25 minutes.
25 minutes. Shit. Okay.
And we don't swear on this either.
Sorry. Shit. Sorry.
See you guys, what I'm saying?
I don't follow rules very well. So my recovery story. Well, my drugs of choice that I used were opiates and the abundance of alcohol. I had a chronic pain condition, and eventually, through trial and error of all the medications that I was allergic to, it became narcotics was one of the only medications I wasn't allergic to. So starting to take opiates. I had a doctor who, this was about 13, 14 years ago, so a lot of the things that came in place that they are today were not in effect, and I had a doctor that gave me pretty much anything I wanted for my pain. I didn't know exactly when I became mentally addicted to the pills. I knew I was physically addicted. But even going back, I remember the first time I was 9 or 10 years old I had Tylenol with codeine because my eardrum had ruptured. I remember my mom giving it to me and laying down on the couch, and I was like, now I can sleep. Like, I still remember, I can picture the entire room, the way it looked, what was on TV, Scooby-Doo. It was the Phyllis Diller episode. It was awesome. But I can remember all of that. And even looking back at how I drank, like when I was in college or I was younger, it was still binging. It was always in there with me. And so I might have always been mentally addicted, I'm not sure. But before I was aware of it, I knew I was physically addicted. Because the first time my medication went out and I went into withdrawal, I didn't know what was happening. And it was really, really scary. So immediately it was like, I got to get more once I figured out, I'm out of this. So that was, it was pretty hardcore for a while. I had 7 drug and alcohol overdoses. In 2016, on July 3rd, I had my last overdose, and it was the same hospital 7 times, and never once was recovery talked to me about something to do that maybe you have a problem with this. I was identified as a frequent flyer, somebody who was always trying to get opiates, or somebody who was always overdosing from them, but physically I'd be fine, and they'd kick me out. And each of those 6 times prior, I was planning my next binge while I was still in the hospital. Like, is this still left? Okay, what do I have here? Where could I get this? All that kind of, those shenanigans. The 7th time that I woke up, I just knew it had to be different. I knew that 12-step programs were out there. You hear about it. I knew some people, I'd heard that they'd gone through a 12-step program, but for me, I had a family member, and I found out that they had been in recovery for quite a while, and I was like, really? That's surprising. So when I overdosed and I woke up and I knew I had to do something different, that's where I went. And the first time I walked into the recovery meetings, I finally felt a sense of belonging. All I had to do was stand up and say who I was. They're like, welcome, you're at the right place. And that's really when I began to start recovering, because I started accepting. I knew at the end there I was an alcoholic. I knew I was a drug addict. That was never a question for me. I knew I would be toasting to alcoholism as I would take shots. I would be, toasting like, here's to the next, overdose. Like, it was cunning, baffling, and powerful. That's what it was. And for me, and it was hard to come back from, but at the same time, I didn't have anything left. The friends in my life, they were more drinking acquaintances than the friends. The true friends I had, I'd pushed away. My family, I hadn't lost them yet. I still have them part of my life, by the grace of God. I knew it was the last time with my mother for that last overdose. She made that very clear to me. So I decided to take this recovery route. And the more I got into my recovery program, the more I realized, exactly what has been wrong with me. I felt like my whole life, it's not necessarily a drinking and drugging disease, it's a thinking disease. And I had to get better on my thinking. So as I said, I am part of a 12-step fellowship. those 12 steps have saved my life. In addition, with some really great therapy, trauma therapy I've gone through. I've gone through a lot of DBT counseling to help me understand and be aware of what my emotions are. Because before recovery, I didn't want to feel anything. Pleasure, pain, joy, sorrow, all over the spectrum. I did not want to feel. Some call it passive suicide. I wasn't trying to kill myself. And because of all the overdoses, even up to that last one, I would take so much and I would be so afraid to go to sleep because I'm going to wake up, either not wake up or wake up in a hospital again. But then when I'd wake up, I'd be so angry at the world because I woke up. I got to do this again. It's just the insidiousness of I spent so much of my life trying to be anything other than me. And today I want to be me. And that's what with my recovery, that I've learned how to be me. And one of the reasons that I've gotten into peer recovery coaching is because I don't want people to feel so alone like I did finding recovery. There's so many different ways to recovery, and having a person at your side to, just walk along that path with you and help point things out. I really wish I had that. And so if one less person has to go through that experience, I didn't have to wait for 7 almost near-death experiences and how many shots of Narcan and, all of that. I didn't have to do that. But that's the path that was for me. And, through my recovery and my trainings I've taken, I have learned that my primary purpose is to stay sober and help other people who want recovery achieve it. It's pretty simple as that.
And you mentioned trauma.
Yes.
And you work in the field of...
Yes, I do.
Besides being a peer recovery coach.
I'm hired as a peer recovery coach with a community mental health.
Okay. And you probably see, that's one common thing if people are open with what's going on with them, is there was some kind of trauma.
There has been research. Dr. Gabor Mate has talked about that trauma is the root of addictions. And there's been more and more research coming out to prove that theory. I personally believe it. I'm not a scientist or a statistician or anything, but I know for me, I had some early, very traumatic experiences in my life. And the more that I try to stuff those feelings away, the more I drank and drug, because I could not deal with that. And a lot of, with what I see, there is a lot of trauma. I know a lot of people that have addictions because they were trying to self-medicate for a mental illness that either was never diagnosed or was wrongly diagnosed. And
admitting that you have trauma and talking about the trauma, I know you don't have to admit it. It's not like it's something you should be ashamed of, but to admit it, because if you look at the older generation, they'll say, well, we had trauma, but we didn't do all that. Well, yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Just you didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
You hid from it. Yeah, you had World War II and Vietnam, stuff like that, and
yes.
that's got to be insane and crazy. And now it's a different crazy. People are shooting up places, and there's trauma and experiences that people have are everywhere, and they always have been. It's just now I don't feel like I have to be afraid. I don't have to come out and tell you my trauma.
Yeah.
But I can say, hey, I experienced trauma. It had me running away from life instead of trying to live it and move on from it. It's just such a different era from back in the day and now.
It's easier to accept people's personal trauma now because we live in a traumatic world. Mm-hmm. You turn on the news and, there's even reports of asteroids coming to Earth.
Oh.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to watch. I know, right? That's when I kind of turn off the news. But, you see the shootings. 31 dead in a 12-hour period. Yeah. What was that? There's just trauma everywhere.
And it's always been that way. And, back when I was in school, a couple years ago, there wasn't social media. People brought guns to my school all the time.
Yeah.
It wasn't blown up on the news, but it's like, and I don't agree with that, obviously, that people should bring guns to schools and shoot people all the time. But back then, I think it did happen, too. It just wasn't reported as widely. And now I think there's a political agenda behind it. You know,
Yeah.
it's like whether you're